Okay, so for this lesson, I'm going to show the correct way to use pencil crayons to color an object, and I'm going to show how to shade at the same time. So I'm just going to lightly draw out the shape of the orange. So usually if you're going to color in the orange, you go, okay, well that's easy. You just go and you pick the one orange pencil crayon. But the correct way to use pencil crayons is called glazing. And the word glazing means to create thin layers or see-through layers. And what that does is it creates a much more rich surface than if you just use the orange. So you always want to use at least 2 pencil crayons. Using 3 pencil crayons is even better. Just lost my orange. So I could use red to get the darker colors, but for this one, if you look at the orange, you can see there's a lot of brown in there, so I'm going to choose the brown as well. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is start with the lightest color. So I'm going to leave a little bit of a white spot here and a little bit of a white spot there to match the ones in the orange. And other than that, I'm just going to go and color the whole thing yellow to begin with. Remember, you use the point to draw. You always use the side to shade. So I'm going to go ahead. And remember, you're trying not to press down too fast, too hard, because the harder you press with a pencil or a pencil crayon, the less control that you have over that medium. So you notice I'm going kind of up and down for this. Now I'm going to turn around. That orange is never going to stay there. And I'm going to start to go in another direction. And that is how you cover a surface. By going in more than one direction. And we're going to start covering. So what you want to do is you kind of want to get rid of the white of the paper. Speaking of which, I totally forgot about my 2 little white spots. I'm just going to go back. Yes, you can erase pencil crayon. And I'm just going to kind of lighten it up a little bit there and there. Okay, so now that I've got the first layer down, now I'm going to go and I can go to the orange. And by going over top of the yellow with the orange, it's going to be a much nicer surface. So when we are shading spheres, you need to remember that you should be going around as you shade. You shouldn't be going up and down. So now I'm going to start to do that. I'm going to start to go in circular directions to help me get this done. And when you first start to do it, doesn't look so good because I'm getting a lot of lines in what I'm doing. But understand that we're talking about building up layers. And that means you're not trying to press down and get this done as fast as you can. You need to take some time to go ahead and do this. Now, at this point, I need to start spinning my paper. And because it's a cylinder, it's going to be a lot lighter on the top, but it's going to start to get darker as it goes near the bottom. So I'm going to leave that little white spot there. I'm going to come up through the middle. And I'm starting to get my orange layer on here. And remember, it takes a bit of time to build up your color. So now at this point, I'm going to start to press a little bit more. I'm still not going too dark yet. But you can also already see that the color of orange is much more interesting because it's got the yellow underneath. It's one of the things is that, you know, suddenly at 1 year in school, they go, okay, no more crayons. Now you can use pencil crayons, but no one really ever stops and teaches you how to use pencil crayons. And when you start to see what happens when you learn how to layer, it's so much more interesting. Okay, so at this point, you can use the lighter color to go back and blend. So I'm going to go back over the orange with the yellow, and it's going to start filling in all those little kind of gaps. And again, I'm going in different directions. And I'm pressing down at this point because I'm just blending. I don't have to worry too much about the control at this point. And I'm starting to get a more interesting color. Okay, so now I'm gonna go back in with the orange. Now I'm gonna start to get a lot darker, and I'm also gonna start shading. So remember, when you have a sphere, you have your lightest spot here, and then you slowly get darker and darker as you get down here. And you can see that on the orange. It's lighter here, it's going darkest down here. So obviously it depends on what your actual light sources are, where your light is, but for the most part, you're gonna be lighter on your top and darker on the bottom. So you can see now I'm able to actually press down. I'm still in control. I'm still being pretty careful about this, but I'm able to start pressing down. I'm still trying to curve my coloring. The more you curve when you're trying to show that something's round, the better it's gonna look. And then you can see up here at the top, it gets darker again. So I'm gonna get darker again. So what we don't want to do is this. I call this an edge. It's where I suddenly went from light to dark. We always want to blend. So blend means we slowly go to that dark, not suddenly go. So we kind of have to go back over it a bit to be able to do that. And now I'm kind of getting to the point where, wow, my orange is looking a lot better now. But it still looks way better than if I hadn't put the yellow down to begin with. That's what glazing does for you. Okay, now I'm gonna go ahead, and I could go in with red a little bit at this point if I want. You kind of go through the color wheel. Adding some red, it's gonna look good, but I'm gonna switch right to the brown. Okay, so the darkest part on a cylinder is gonna be down here. So I'm gonna go ahead and start to get my brown in here. And I'm pressing down a fair bit down at the bottom because I know that's the darkest part. But as I start to go up, I'm getting lighter and lighter. That means I'm not pressing as hard on my pencil. And you can see it's gonna start to make it look even more round. Now, I just messed up a bit. I got way too dark right there. We don't want any outlines. So hopefully you can go in and just kind of erase that out a bit, right? We never want a dark outline. One of the tricks for making things look as real looking as you can is to never have outlines. Outlines are great for cartoons, for graphic design, but when we're trying to do realistic rendering, and we are, you want to avoid those outlines. Okay, this is starting to happen now. So I'm going over with the brown, and you might be thinking, going, well, that starts to look pretty messy. That's because we're gonna go back with the orange over top of that brown. So as we're shading, we're still glazing, and the orange pencil crayon will now act as a blender, and we can start blending all that brown into the orange as well. Okay, I've got, my white spots are way too big, so I'm just gonna go over those guys a little bit, get those a bit smaller. And because I'm using the orange, I can go back to the yellow to blend those. And you can see I end up with a nice solid coloring on here. So mine's still looking a little more yellow than I want. So at this point, I'm gonna go back with the orange. I'm pressing down pretty hard right now to get that orange going. But so what happens is we now have something that glows because it's got that lighter color underneath. We're starting to get a nice glowing look. Yeah, and then at the end, I mean, I can always go and put the little kind of green circle thing there if I want to get that kind of spot on it. My edges are pretty messy. That's not the skill that we're learning today. We're just learning how to control the pencil crayon. So if I just kind of hold this up a little closer to the camera, you can see we're starting to get a really nice, rich surface. And that is how you glaze with pencil crayon.